Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is a bonus episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Now, as ever, let's begin by banging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to this bonus episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. And before I introduce you to this week's guest, I should make you aware that the Ministry of Arts has now got a merch shop where you can buy t-shirts, hoodies, tote bags, with 100% of the proceeds going back into the podcast. And to find those said items, if you go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile, you'll find a Linktree drop-down box, and that'll direct you straight to their merch shop. Well, for today's episode, I spoke to Steve Bannatyne. He's either a painter, a sculptor, or a collage maker, or a bit of all three. Now, I should mention, as a sort of trigger warning, in this episode we do speak of death, bereavement and attempted suicide. Although, I should also state, from the darkness there is light, because it has got a very happy ending. But I just needed to make you aware of those facts, just in case you've been affected by that in the past yourself. And that said, please come with me and listen to this beautiful story told to us by Steve Bannatyne. That's a good backdrop you've got there, Steve.
Yeah, this is part of my show in September. So this is one wall of many. I've got 71 pieces that I'm showing.
Nice.
Producing a lot the last 8 months. So things have sort of just taken off after 20 years of, well, you can understand what it's like. You know.
Oh, of course. So I've got a list of several questions. The first being, how would you explain what you do to someone that may not know your work?
I think the best way to describe it is, well, I'm I'm like a womble. I tend to collect a lot of stuff. It all relates back to my childhood and my growing up and my learning of art, where I would work with nothing virtually.
Yeah.
So I started collecting waste that I liked, waste timber. And it's about color and patina. So that would form the basis of a piece of work. I like to, it's difficult. I work in many different ways, so sculpture and wall relief, but in a nutshell, I use waste material for create shapes. I play with the color. The closest you could link it to in terms of a movement would be constructivism, perhaps. I'm heavily influenced by Russian constructivism and by British modernism. So from the earlier days, and it's a dive set. That's where I found my work. So it is abstract, but also I've got a training as a graphic designer. So there's all these different elements that come into it. And as I said to you earlier, I produce so much work, so many different threads that I work through. So it's actually difficult to pin down what I do. Every day seems different. And the show I'm about to put on has three elements to it, and they're all different. But they all basically start with waste timber. So I basically thrive off the remains of consumerism. So things that have been discarded and chucked away become my palettes and my canvases.
Just before we started recording, you did mention where you get your wood from, your found objects, if you like. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I used to skip surf, but about 7 years ago, I joined an organisation called the Brighton Hove Wood Recycling Project, and it's an environmental protection charity with some social aims as well. And we essentially go to building sites and we charge people to take away waste timber that is destined for landfill and incineration, and we then recycle that into the consumer network, and we resell it to the public and to trade. But we also use it to make furniture for commercial customers. So we do cafe fit outs and things like that. And I get the vast majority of my timber now from our waste bin.
Brilliant.
Stuff that we really can't use, that has to then be shredded. I take the very, very raw, rough, damaged stuff and I turn it into artwork. So it's trying to keep it circular. So 25 years ago, when we started as an organization, we were doing circular economy before the phrase had been invented. So we work with a team of volunteers who use all of our furniture, and it's a fantastic project. And there's now 30 of them across the UK.
Brilliant.
And I'm terrible. I pick up everything. I'm a real hoarder. I've got to try and work on.
Did you have any creativity in the home, Steve?
When I was a child?
Yeah.
Not at all. No, I grew up in quite an awful. My background was awful. I've got more information. We can talk about that, but no. So I had a very narcissistic mother. My parents divorced when I was 18 months, and my mum then remarried an abusive alcoholic. So there was no creativity. It was more about survival mode.
More of a struggle. I was going to say more of a struggle. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it wasn't nice. So I grew up in East Belfast, and right in the Troubles, and there was a lot of violence, a lot of death, a lot of murders, and you see on a daily basis. So I grew up with that, and my creativity started. Well, my introduction was through doing my art GCSEs. I had a wonderful teacher, and I was the only student I think that took it seriously and really enjoyed it, and it lit something in me. But I'd bring my work home, and I'd get no feedback. I'd get no support from my family, my parents. So it was very, very difficult. So you're kind of rudderless a little bit if your parents aren't there supporting you or not on your side, then it's very, very difficult. So it can wreck your creativity. So yeah, like a lot of kids in Belfast, I was sort of running around trying not to get beaten up or trying to work out what we're going to do. And I left Belfast when I was 16 in the end, to get away from my family, the stepfather of mine. And I also got in some trouble with the paramilitaries. And I also realized
that wasn't hard to do at that point, though, was it?
Oh, it was really easy. Oh, and I was so the problem I had is that my mum felt that all of our issues, all the family issues, were down to me and my brother, but it wasn't. We were actually the sum of all of their work, and their parenting skills were not there. So I rebelled, like a lot of my friends. So we went out and we did lots of silly things. I was taking drugs at 12. I was drinking at 12. And I'm not talking, the odd beer. I was every night, and we were doing all sorts to get the money for it. It wasn't good. And you start messing around, you bit of antisocial behaviour. There's nothing for kids to do when I was growing up. It was you just wander the streets. So we got in quite a lot of trouble. I got picked up 3 times by the police, and of course, that was all put on to me. But it was more about discipline, but no communication. So I'm very different from my children, and it's all open communication. We talk about drinking, drugs, and we've got a great life. But I got beaten down quite heavily as a child, and when I left, to me, misogyny and abusive behaviour was a normal family life.
Yeah,
I had to quickly unlearn all of that. So I bailed out when I was 16. I had a £5 in my pocket. I landed in Exeter. And I did my A levels and my art and design foundation. So the 3 years a lot of art students will do. I made contact with my father, but I had to find a place to live. So I was living in a bedsit. I was stacking shelves while I put myself through college, surviving on barely anything.
What year
but
was this, Steve?
Oh God, 1995. I got into St Martin's, so it was early 90s.
Got you.
Very early 90s. When I did all of that. But it's sort of, it's a journey I had to go on. As that, my brother stayed and he did a creative degree, but didn't use it. So I spent 3 years at Exeter College, and I met an amazing teacher called Jim Kennedy, who was very alternative in his thoughts. And he introduced me to Russian constructivism, and I ate that up. So Katlin, Bochenko, and Popova, all of these greats, and it really, really, really fed my creativity. And Exeter College every year put people up to get into St Martin's, and nobody was getting in. The year that I got in, 2 of us got in.
Brilliant.
And I think that was all down to Jim and how he steered us. But I just ate it up. I had this ball of energy in my tummy the whole time. I loved it. I thrived on it. And I think that offset all the negativity because I was where I wanted to be. And I've always been quite prolific in my creation and my outputs. So when I went to the interview, that was phenomenal. Really, really great. Changed my life. But the week of my degree show, my dad, who had been in contact with, decided to disappear again. So he was meant to come up to my degree show, and I was waiting for him, and I phoned him, and nothing. And he'd basically packed up and left. So he'd moved and disappeared. So I had that to contend with. But at the same time. But then my brother was there, and it was great with a few drinks. So it was really nice to make a connection with him, because when I left, he was left on his own. But I couldn't stay there anymore. But he was a bit closer to my mum, I suppose. So, yeah, my brother and I both find creativity, and we love talking to each other about photography. And I collect photographic books now. I buy them up left, right, and centre. Huge influence for me. And we would talk for hours. And we did actually have to plan to work together. But then he had a heart attack and died. He was 39.
Oh, well, sorry.
Yeah, no, and well, it gets worse, because this is one of those unpleasant stories. But he was 39, 2 months off his 40th birthday, and he went out for a run and had a heart attack and died. It turned out he had a genetic condition that was in our family, and my dad knew about the condition and didn't tell anybody.
Oh, wow.
None of us got screened. So I've got a half brother who also had a heart attack and nearly died, but he was playing football, and there was paramedics that were able to revive him. So had he told us, we could have all got screened. My brother could have gone on to lifelong medication.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be able to run anymore, but he would have been alive. So, it's probably dual narcissist parents here, who didn't really want to think about anybody but themselves. So yeah, he died when he was 39, and it was such a shock, such a shock.
Yeah.
And what that did is it forced me. I went and got checked, but it forced me into ultra running. So I started running, and the 2 years after he had passed away, I ran 8 ultra marathons. And it was a way of coping with what had happened. Going through that. So I've run.
And did you have the gene?
No.
Oh, good.
No. I go every 3 years to get scanned, but I'm at the age now where it won't show up, because if I've got it, then my kids might have it.
Yeah.
So I've had so many ECGs, echocardiograms. I should do some art around that. But I've been really, really safe with my heart. I'm lucky, but yeah, I miss him. I miss him a lot. He was like my right arm, and it's very sad that that could have been avoided. But this is life. It's human nature to be awful to people sometimes, isn't it?
Got like when you're creating artwork, when you're running, and as you can see, this isn't from experience, but you have to put yourself in a mental zone, don't you? Take yourself
100%.
away from the
you do.
And
I run talks. So I run long distance with friends, and we run at a slow pace, and we chat, and we set the world right. So I live in a lovely community, but like a lot of communities, you get men that don't want to talk about issues and problems, and we go on these runs and we'll open up and talk, and it's actually really, really quite nice when you come back and you've got the energy from the run, but also the mental health side of it is great. So I'm a big advocate for mental health, and supporting charities that support people struggling with their mental health. So it's something I'd like to do longer term. If my art career takes off a bit more and have a bit more influence, then I'd like to be able to work on that, because I've had my own battles, like many people with mental health, success with their lives and their happiness, But 2 years ago, I got to the point where I couldn't have been any happier, So I met my partner Naomi about 19 years ago, and she was this giant of a woman. She was amazing. Like, just, she took me from this person who was quite rudderless, and she should have helped my development through into an artist. And I had a really difficult time. It was a couple of years ago, and it was lockdown, and the organization I was working for was really struggling. We had a lot of staff go, and I was working 60 hours a week doing all these different jobs that people had sort of gone.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that I was really pushing myself quite hard, and I started to crack. I stopped creating anything. I wasn't doing any artwork at all. I was out of the house for hours and hours at a time. I worked from 8 till 8 regularly. And I didn't realize, but I was starting to break down mentally. And I actually planned to kill myself without really understanding that I could talk to people about it. So I devised it. I'm quite a practical person. I make a lot of things with my hands, and I devised a plan to do it. And I knew I'd be successful, and it was just a case of taking the time. But it was funny, because when you're in that state, you don't think about your kids, you don't think about your partner, you don't think about anything. You're acting really irrationally. So anyway, I gathered all my paraphernalia together. I locked the door, and I was getting ready. And I have my headphones in all the time when I'm at work. If I'm working on making something, it's a good distraction. And I was feeling quite happy. I was feeling quite relaxed. This sort of weird feeling came over me, and I felt relieved. So I started the process, and this track came on in my ear, and it was a track called Song of the Seven, and it's from Game of Thrones. And now this song, my son played 2 weeks previously on his piano. He's very, very talented. He can listen to songs and play it. And I cried when he played it. We both cried when he played it. I had to leave his room. And all of a sudden, this song comes on, and I'm just crying my eyes out. And I'm looking at what I'm about to do, and I go, you know what? I'm going to catch myself on. And I stepped back from everything, and I thought, this is wrong. I should not be doing this. Anyway, 2 weeks later, I was under the supervision of the Eastbourne mental health team. I had to check in every day. Nemi found out what was going on, and it really, really upset her. But that week she cancelled all of her work for the summer, and she declared it the summer of Steve. And we spent 8 weeks just focusing on me and what I wanted to do. But seriously, I spent 2 weeks lying on the sofa, unable to move. I was on antidepressants, sleeping pills, and we were trying different types. I really, really struggled. And we cried and we talked, and it was great. And she sort of pulled me back from the brink. Went back to work 2 months later, and Naomi was like, right, we're going to change our lives now. If you want to be creative, she was writing a book at the time. So we both decided to go part-time. We reduced all of our outgoings. We worked really hard at that. And we just got by. So I worked 3 days a week. She worked 3, roughly. All I wanted to do was to create and find that warm gut feeling of creativity that I just thrive off. And then he said, why don't you do an open house? Why don't you do Artwave? And Artwave it was 160 artists when I did it, 180 this year. And it goes along the coast through Lewis, etc. And you open your house and people come around and buy your artwork. So I put 15 pieces up. I sold 15 pieces. It was insane. I sold my entire show. And that really validated everything. It validated all the crap I'd been through, because actually I had some success. And when people were hearing that I'd sold everything, they were like, that's crazy. That doesn't generally happen. So I came through, and I had this unbelievable high, and I just kept creating. Nemi was writing her book, and life was sweet. I'd come through this risk of, suicide, and I'd self-harmed before, but this was the final one. But I came through, I had the counselling, came off the pills, and I was happy, and I was a better dad. I was so focused on my kids. They were seeing what I was producing, they were getting enthusiastic, and they were learning, and it was just a fantastic time in my life.
Now, if I can just pause it there again, Steve, there's a little gap in the story somewhere.
Yeah.
That I'd just like to fill in before we come back to that point. Yeah. So you've done your graphic design degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
When did the creating your own work come into that?
So I ended up working full time in a regular job, and then creativity became part time. Then I met Naomi, and we started our life together. And she actually opened my eyes up to different ways of thinking. So, I was sort of working just to survive, which wasn't really quite right. So we had 2 kids, and my life sort of switched up. So like a lot of students, you come out, it's hard. Nobody prepares you for it. So, we moved in together in London. We bought a house together eventually. And then 11 years ago, we moved down to Sussex.
Nice.
And I started working with environmental businesses, and then started really focusing on the creative, the artist side. So friends were starting to refer to me as an artist. And one friend came around and said, look, you're an artist. It doesn't matter that you have to work part-time or full-time for other people. You are, at your core, an artist. And that one conversation actually really made me think. So, like a lot of people, I was rudderless for quite a while after university, in a nutshell. So fast forward, did Artwave, really happy, came out of it. Life was near perfect. I was earning money from my artwork, really nice. Then one morning we woke up and everything changed. Naomi was sick one morning, very sick, after her breakfast, and phoned the GP. A week later, she had a colonoscopy. A week after that, she was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
So I had this life, and things were, after 20 years of practicing and struggling and mental health fights and learning to be a dad, my life settled, and I was like, found it. I'm here. This is nirvana. Yeah. So I then had to cut back on my work and start caring for her. And at every meeting we went to, they took hope away from us. We went to the third meeting. It was her CT scan, and her liver was riddled with lesions. And at that point, they said, you've maybe got 6 months.
And when was this, Steve? Sorry.
This was just after Artwave. Everything started to happen. So we're into about a year of all of this happening. I'm not actually very good with dates.
But when was roughly from today?
So the whole thing started about 5 months ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So no, it's fine. Yeah, because it was a blur, really. So in the end, it passed so quickly. You had the final meeting, and we sat there, and her liver clearly wasn't working, and she was struggling to walk, and her eyes had gone. They color. Her legs had swollen, her stomach had swollen. She had 17 liters of fluid in her stomach alone. She was losing weight, and the specialist came in, and he had a look at her tummy again, and he said, "I can give you 3 weeks." And she lasted 3 weeks and 4 days. Yeah, it was tough, but I have to be clear on this. I've had a lot to deal with as a young man, and when we had the diagnosis, we actually had a very practical conversation. Naomi's a very practical person, and she said to me, "We're going to organize our financials. We're going to do X, Y, Z." We had all this planning to do. She says, "I want to get married." So we got married. It was more of she wanted to sort of like, we've had our life together. Now it's time to say thank you and goodbye.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
What a person she was.
So she touched many people's lives, and when people found out about it, there was just this outpouring of grief. People were coming around and just crying. Men crying in the street to me because she was so popular within the village. She was a very kind, very generous person. So we had this whole conversation, and she planned how she wanted to pass. She didn't want any interference, and we put all of this into action. She was in hospice for 3 weeks, so I was going to the hospice, and I'd stay over. And she was gradually declining, but she wasn't in any discomfort. Her decline was 2 days before she passed, and she passed happily, how she wanted to.
Yeah.
And the boys, from the get-go, we told them what was going on. We were honest with the boys, because that's how we are as parents. We communicate.
Could I ask how old the boys were?
They're now 13 and 16.
Oh, wow.
And Finley was mid GCSEs when she died. And he went in and did his English, and he passed GCSE.
Wow.
He went in. One of her dying wishes was that he do his GCSEs. And I told him Sunday morning she passed away. Monday morning at 9 o'clock, he was sitting down to do his English GCSE. I didn't cry at that point.
Sorry, Steve. And when was that?
That was June, early June.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He's definitely got a bit of his mum's genes in him, hasn't he? That's for sure.
Yeah, I think he's a good combination. So both my boys are very sciencey, like their mum, and they've got creative elements like their dad. They're both really well-adjusted, wonderful boys. They've been a massive support to me. But Naomi and I had all the conversations around funeral, about moving on, about future life. She said it's really important that you are happy. She knew if I'm happy, my kids are happy. So I live for my children. And I'm transitioning now more from regular work to being an artist on a full-time basis. And that's all because of her. Like the 71 pieces I have in my show would not exist without her. That's part of her legacy. Her book, we're publishing at the end of the year, maybe early next year, will go into print. We raise money to do that as another legacy for her. She's a phenomenal writer. We came through it, and actually, I have to say, I'm okay. I've had my counselling. It was more of a shock when my brother died, because it was so sudden.
Yeah.
Naomi and we had a great last 8 weeks. We had a lot of fun. Every day was great. We cooked, We ate as much as she could. We got out as much as we could. And she went on her terms, and she was very specific about my happiness and the boys' happiness. And she was like, I want you to move on. I want you to have this amazing life. And I have got an amazing life. I'm actually in quite a good place. I've got my boys. I've got my
You
home.
deserve it, Steve, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, I think, you know, we all have different lives to lead, and you know, it's like playing poker. You get a hand. You got to play that hand. You know, and I'm not one for folding, so I'll go all in.
Good on you.
So, but there's no point in me just lying around, like say, on the sofa crying about it.
Yeah, it's not going to make the situation any better, is it?
No, and I've gotten through the worst of it, and every day is not easier. It's just different, but I know that she'd be immensely proud right now of me and the boys. And I know that she's around in some way. She's an amazing person, full stop. There's nobody else like her. I'm not just saying that because she has died. It's a common theme when you speak to people. I'm a lucky man. I may never have met her. I may end up with some crazy, crazy person. But I was really
like
sensible, mature. Yeah, like she did. She got the short end. She got the short end of the stick. All in all, I've come through the worst of it. I feel stronger.
Good.
And that's only going to reflect in my artwork. And some of the artwork on display here was created while she was in the hospice. In my notebook, and actually it's quite interesting to see those artwork in comparison to others. You know, it's funny, grief does these funny things to you, but it brought out a lot of alternative thinking.
And have you been creative recently?
100%. I haven't stopped. So I did this dual focus thing initially, early days when she died, where I would focus on the grief. I'd let it kick my ass and rip me to pieces. You know, and little things like when you got to move her handbag, or you've got to inform people, you've got to driver's license, all that stuff that people don't tell you about, horrific. I would spend half a day just dealing with that and grieving and crying. Then I would spend the rest of my time creating. And actually it worked really well. So I'd have these sorrowful moments where I could reconcile and think about her, but then these amazing creative moments. And it literally, the artwork just came flying out of me. So I could work on 5 pieces at once. They're all very similar in a set. And it used to sometimes take 2 months to do a piece of work, but then I would produce in 2 days. I have 5 pieces done that already worked really well.
Yeah.
One thing Nemi encouraged me to do after Artwave is to build my own studio, which I've done. So I built my own studio from scratch in the garden.
Where did you get the wood from?
So 80% of it. This is a good case study. So 80% of the timber is reclaimed.
Brilliant.
I've used no concrete. I've got ground screws, so zero impact when it comes out.
Yeah.
It took me nearly a year because I had to wait for the right materials to come in.
Of course.
But I've built it to look like it's not reclaimed. So I'm opening that up. I'm opening up for the show. So I've got 3 spaces for my Artwave exhibition. I'm going to let people into my studio, which, to be honest, I don't want to do because it's my private space. But actually, why not? Why not? You know, I tend to be quite open about most things. So why don't I build my bloody studio?
And how many pieces have you got to put into that?
In total, I've got 71 pieces of artwork. And that might sound like a lot, but what I'm doing this year is I'm having one room just full of prep work. So my studies are going in. I wanted people to see my thought processes. So I've got notebook pages in there. I've got some prints. So in my studio, I've got about 10 pieces in my studio, big pieces. And then the rest, I've got a big kitchen diner. It's all in there. And then my living room. So it could be a massive show. I've got, you know, it's 4 times the size of the show I did first time around. I've had to take a lot of advice on pricing. This is a common artist's concern.
Yeah.
I hate pricing. So I've had other artists and I've had people who buy art for a living come in and look at it. And I'll be like, so much money. It's crazy. So I'm working on the square inch pricing now, which is crazy. But so people, there's a square inch pricing. So I got one piece valued by somebody in the know, who's an active buyer, and I've just extrapolated that. So I've had fun pricing everything. So it's nice. It's nice because I'm not underselling myself. You know what I mean? It feels like it.
Could I ask what your prices range from and to, roughly? Okay,
so the cheapest piece I will have on apart from prints, the cheapest piece of artwork is £130, and that's about A4, and that's a wall relief, small wall relief collage.
Is that like those behind you?
No, these ones here. So the little ones you can see. sunrise and sunset. They're landscapes. Those two are I haven't priced them yet, but they're around about 250,
Got you.
300. The ones above, I've just sold one of those, and they're the £400 mark.
Nice.
So they seem to work. So 130.
Just
Biggest I've got.
you've mentioned you've mentioned sunrise and sunset that are behind you.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is audio that people won't be able to see. Could you just describe those two artworks?
So the artworks you see on the back are all from my running trips. So I'm obviously taking lots of pictures. I've got a running Instagram account, and I'm always posting landscapes. So what I do is I will take a picture, I will pull it into Procreate, and I will take shapes and lines from that picture. I then use old plywood, which I then cut with a jigsaw. So these are two hills near where I live, and you've got the sunset and the colours from the sunset. The arches are about the hills and the curves. And they're really, really simple. There's only 4 elements in each one, but they just sort of resonated. So they've come from little line drawing in Procreate, where I've extrapolated and fiddled around with the shapes. So one is the sun coming up, and one is the sun coming down, and they're part of a set there.
Brilliant.
And the colouring is all sort of guts.
Yeah.
To be honest, it comes from my graphic design background, I think.
And the colour tone that you use, it does feel sort of like from the industrial era. It's got
there's constructivism in there.
Grey tones from the.
I love grey.
I love grey.
So I pretty much have lots of greys and deep blues, and then I've used sort of acid yellows, oranges, and crazy pinks, reds as well. The other one there, that little one beside me, those two are a few of my favourites. But I've got some Faro and ball paint in there because I had it, and the colours seem to work.
Yeah.
So I think the colour is one of the strongest things about my work. But it seems to come naturally. I don't know. It's just when you're laying out something for in 2D design, colors, when you do it for so long and you're working with it, it seems to come naturally. But don't get me wrong, there could be 2 weeks worth of work in both of those, on a part-time basis. It's not quick. You can't see the detail, so I've etched into them with mark making tools. So there's grass, straw, and I've tried to create texture in the timber.
They look cracking up on the wall, even in group like that. Did you purposely put those up in that order?
Yeah, they're in a group. They're a set.
Because they look cracking there.
There's nice. More. So that blue one is sold. So I've got a set, and there's one more to go in that gap. That actually is it'll be dedicated to Naomi. I'm working on it now. I'm hoping to get it finished. But the other side, I've got a lot more. I build plinths. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got about 8 plinths. I've got sculpture. I'll try and turn you around. So I've got my son's weight bench. So I've got sculptures as well. So all of these are natural sculptures. I've got these two. Let me try and see them. Sorry. I've got these 2 big fellas here. Which,
I saw those in the drawers.
Yes. So they're proving quite popular.
Yeah.
They'll probably be 2 of the more expensive pieces that go in the show. There's been a lot of interest in those. So I'll have to see.
Because the ones above you there are in a it looks like a small tray frame.
Yeah, I've had to frame some of them. Some of them need a frame, and some don't.
But they work. Yeah, they work. Yeah. I think they work better with the frame. But the sunsets there and the sunrise, they work well without it. That's for sure. And that grey one looks really good.
I've coloured all the way around. So I think the frames are just like a gut instinct, really. Some of them some of the bigger ones, the other side overspill the canvas, so I can't frame them.
Because I saw that on one of your sculptures, it was like a condensed cityscape, wasn't it?
Yeah, so they're a whole set, and they're based on a project called Picking Up Sticks, where I was literally picking up sticks. It's like a New York cityscape.
Yeah.
So they're all really rare hardwoods that I find that are discarded. And the thing is, you can't really get hardwoods that easily anymore.
No.
Chop all the trees down. And I thought about, when I was doing this project, I thought about 1930s, 40s, and 50s sort of American landscapes, cityscapes, and how all of this timber's been molded to build these buildings and to fit these buildings out. But all I can find now are little bits of stick. So I created, I think, four cityscapes out of that. out of what I had, and I've done some wall relief ones as well, which are all going in the show. So yeah, I've really enjoyed making those, and again, they're proving quite popular. But I sand all the timber down, I wax it, I oil it, I do it to a high standard. And they've got, yeah, I suppose you could look at some constructivist work and maybe find influence there as well. So have you heard of Margaret Mellis?
No.
So she was a bit of a mentor to Damien Hirst, and she's really underrated. She passed away now. Margaret Mellis was one of the first artists to move down St Ives with her husband, Adrian Stokes. So she was friends with Hepworth and Nicholson, hugely influential to me, and she worked in the same way. So her studio in Suffolk was essentially a big pile of timber and lots of things lying on the floor. And she'd walk into and move something and walk out and move it again. And it would take months to sort of build something up. But she worked with driftwood and colourful driftwood. And when I saw her work, I was like, bang,
yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. So I did my Artwave show last year, and this chap came in. We were chatting, and he said, "Oh, I did some driftwood," and he said, "Oh, my cousin was a driftwood artist," and I was like, "How we go? There's loads of driftwood artists." And he said, "Oh, have you heard of her, Margaret Mellis?" And I'm like, I nearly fell over. So he was living up the road. Her cousin lived up the road, and he said to me, "I've got some for artwork. Come up and see." Yeah. So he bought one of my pieces, and he's hung it up. And he had a watercolor she'd done when she was 13. So he invited me up for a cup of tea and had a look at it. It's just crazy, that connection. And some of the money I made from my show, I bought some of her postcards and letters.
Wow.
On a catalogue. She did exhibit in the Towner quite a while ago, and I missed that. But she's really underrated, great female artist. I rate her above many of her contemporaries. And I really wish I'd got the chance sort of to meet her. But, you know, Damien Hirst seemed to like her and get on with her. And I think they did a book together.
Got you. Well, that in mind, Steve, the questions that I do have that went out the window within about 5 minutes, one of the questions that I do have is, if there was you and 5 other artists, past and present, what would your ideal group show be?
Well, the work wouldn't all work together. I've got Hepworth. I saw her at Tyner, another icon. I have got William Eggleston. I have met him, and I've got in my hands a first edition that I got signed when he was over in London.
Nice.
He got me thinking about old materials and things, and the lovely Americana signage, all of the old Tootsies take pictures of. Really enthusiastically got me going. So Barbara, obviously Margaret Mellis, without a doubt, and Robert Rauschenberg. I buy a lot of books.
Yeah.
So I love, and if you look at his work, you can see there's elements of mine have sort of come from him. So that's 4. Haven't we got 4?
Yeah.
And then the last one, it's going to be Ben Nicholson.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I've got more of his books as well. So that, to be honest, I can give you 50.
But of course, and this 5 will possibly change tomorrow if I ask.
They could change tomorrow, but actually Margaret Mellis is the one consistent individual that'll be in there. And one day I hope to find a piece of her work, wall relief work, and buy it and keep it. And actually this year, when Nemi passed away, I vowed I would only buy female artwork for the next sort of 2 years. I've been buying local artwork from female artists, and that's going to go into my living room as a nice little set, sort of in honor of her memory.
Yeah, of course.
You know, that's my top 5.
And what would you do if you wasn't an artist, Steve?
I'd be lying on a park bench, probably.
Yeah.
At this rate, I'd be doing something really boring. I'd be a drone, I think. No, I've got to be fair with myself. Okay, so I've got a lot of interests. I love building furniture. I do build furniture. I do the odd commission. I build sideboards for people.
Nice.
Out of reclaim. I've done that for quite a while. I do quite a few commissions. So I'd be a carpenter.
And if anyone wants to see what you're doing, Steve, and what you've got coming up, how can they find you, be it website or social media?
So I only use Instagram. So it's steve.bannatyne. And my website is stevebannatyne.com. I've got a very simple website, and I keep it updated quite regularly using my 16-year-old son and Bribery. So yeah, it's just Instagram, steve.bannatyne, and then stevebannatyne.com. And actually for the Artwave Festival, people can sort of Google that. It's a local festival. There is a brochure out, 180 local artists. There's some great trails, some phenomenal artists out there, male and female alike. This year, I couldn't believe the quality, and it's all readily available to purchase for would-be collectors.
And when is that?
That's the first 3 weekends of September. So Saturday the 2nd is the first day it opens. We all do the weekends. I'm doing a private view the day before because there's a lot of people want to put some red stickers on apparently. So I'm going to try and maximize that. But it's I think it's an amazing festival. It's growing every year. It's funded by the local council, subsidized, and they've got a great team of people marketing it and processing it. So I'm honored to be part of it, and obviously because I did really well last year.
Oh, of course.
And then hopefully, off the back of that, I would like to find a gallery. And I'm not really, I've had gallery approaches, but I haven't really done anything with that. But I think this is the time now where I've got more time to develop. I've got some big ideas on what I want to create that, 5 times the scale of what I'm producing right now. So I'm very excited by all of that.
All right then, mate. Well, that's all my questions asked.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So thank you for your time, and it's been an amazing story, and I'm surprised you've come through it, mate. I'm surprised.
I nearly didn't. I nearly didn't. I think we're born tough.
Yeah. And I think all of us, Steve, are a lot tougher than we think we are. It's only when you're faced with these challenges that you realise that there's a lot we can pull out the tank.
We can dig deep, and I think I had to learn young. I got through it, and actually I got to thank my parents because if I lived a normal life, I'd probably be working in a bank in Belfast, bored out of my skull. Not that working in a bank is a bad thing, but you know what I mean. I the fact that I was driven away from home, and that they were both narcissistic individuals, kind of helped me a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm obviously I've lost my life partner.
Only the physical representation of her.
Yeah, no, she's very much still here, still involved. We're going to do her book launch as well. So there's so much to look forward to, and I'm happy, I'm contented. I have my sons. I've got 2 chihuahuas running around the house. Ideal, it's little things.
Just to bring you back down to reality.
They are great lap dogs. They reduce your stress levels. They're a pain in the ass, but I love it. I'm really happy.
All right then, my old mate. Well, I'll let you get back on with your day.
That's excellent. Really appreciate your time.
Good.
All right.
All the best,
Thank
mate.
you.
Thank
Cheers.
you, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Good luck, mate. Hello, me again. I don't normally do an outro, but because of the subject of this podcast, I figured it'd be irresponsible of me not to. If you've been affected by anything covered in this episode and you don't feel comfortable speaking to friend or family, there's a great organisation called My Black Dog, who can be found at myblackdog.co or on Instagram themselves, My Black Dog. The beauty of My Black Dog is you can even do it via text if you don't feel comfortable speaking to someone. But if you think your feelings are a little further advanced than that and you do actually need someone to speak to, then Samaritans is the one. You can call them toll free on 116 123. All the very best. Ta-da. If you've got an exhibition or any other creative project within the arts, or even just want to promote your own artwork, you could do that in podcast form similar to the one you've just listened to. They start at a convenient price point that is comfortable for any artist working on a budget. This podcast itself is created by working artists, and we know how important that is. So to find out more information, you can email us on ministryofartsorg@gmail.com or on Instagram @ministryofartsorg. Ta-da!